How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video, and it looks like today we're going to be looking at Final Fantasy 16. And now I know there's a lot of news around Destiny 2 and the disappointment of that franchise, but that's going to be for another video, and I'm going to give my take on that soon. But today we're going to be looking at Final Fantasy 16. It has sold a staggering 3 million, but it's a far cry from the 10 or 30 million that they were hoping to sell. You know, when you look at games like God of War, which have reached 10 million, you'd expect a franchise that's dearly beloved, like the Final Fantasy series, to hit at least around 5 million. Now, considering the console base is about 40 million units sold, you know, they've been parading that for quite some time, and the reality is 3 million isn't really much of that base. When you look at other games like GTA and Call of Duty, they clearly, you know, dwarf in popularity when it comes to Final Fantasy. And, you know, maybe that's normal, but at the end of the day, it looks like Square Enix aren't happy with the results, and they are blaming Sony's install base for this. Now, they have actually came out originally and said that, you know, the game has sold within their expectations, and although it was on the lower end, it still was within the margin they actually set out. So clearly they expected a lot higher, somewhere in the 5, maybe to 8 million units for a 40 million base unit, you know, platform. And it looks like, you know, now that the information is out, the president isn't overly happy with what's going on. And with that, I guess, comes maybe a strategic shift that we could be looking at, making, you know, the exclusivity of these games a thing of the past. And, well, for gamers, that's amazing if that is the case, because at the end of the day, it means more people will be experiencing the games, and of course, it also means for Square Enix that more people will be buying their games. Even if, you know, the majority of those come from PC alone, there are going to be those on the Xbox platform as well that will buy Final Fantasy games. It's a much beloved franchise. It's got a historic, you know, heritage. Final Fantasy 1 was, you know, the birth. And honestly, if you look up the history of how Final Fantasy actually came to be, the game wasn't even called Final Fantasy. A little trip down memory lane. They were actually developing this game, and they actually ran out of money, and the developers banded together because the studio was going into liquidation. They basically were bankrupt. And so what they actually turned around and agreed with the liquidators was that they would work for free to release this game for their fans. And the liquidators agreed that they could do this, which was, you know, unheard of. And even in today's day and age would be unheard of, right? And so as they were gearing up to finish the game, they decided to rebrand it as Final Fantasy, the final game that they're going to make. And it's their Final Fantasy game. So that's essentially where the title came from. So there's a good history behind this. And once this became a success, the liquidation stopped, and then so forth came Final Fantasy 2, which they had, you know, they actually could only print like 200 or 300 copies of the game. And they sold out instantly, so they were trying to resupply because they couldn't actually get prints out fast enough because they didn't have the money to. And the success of the franchise pretty much took off from there. It's crazy how, you know, storied the legacy is with Final Fantasy. So when someone talks about Final Fantasy, it's very close and dear to them, especially as a game, because at some point, one of the Final Fantasies would have touched them close enough to actually have an impact on them, whether it's Final Fantasy 7, 5, 6, 9, 8. I know many of you don't like 8, but 8 is actually a really nice one. For me, it was 10. That was my first real proper go at it. Then I played 7, and I didn't really enjoy 7 as much as I enjoyed 10. I think 10 was a far superior game. But for everyone, there's a first, and you have fond memories of that game. And so Final Fantasy has this historic lineage where you expect it to sell a lot of copies. But when it came to Final Fantasy 16, they changed a lot. The party system is gone. The way the game is designed is different. I mean, it's not as linear as 13, but it's just missing all the tropes that made Final Fantasy Final Fantasy. There's no elemental weaknesses. There's nothing, you know, there's nothing that you would expect to find in a Final Fantasy game here. It's almost like Crystal Chronicles to a certain extent, like a spin-off, But nonetheless, I still think the game is fantastic. I really enjoyed playing it. I'm still playing through it. Due to time constraints, I can't invest as much as I'd like to, but the game is awesome. I really like it. I like the story. I like the combat. It's different. It sure is. It's not turn-based. It's full-on action, but the game is still good. But the reality is that the game hasn't met expectations, at least according to the president of Square Enix. So, let's get into it. But before we do, if you are enjoying this content and enjoy the news updates that I do bring to you all, do consider leaving a like. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm, and consider subscribing. We are trying to get to 3,000 subs. My goal for the end of the year is 5,000. I know it seems like a lot, but we're already at 2,500 and we've only been alive for about, what, 2 months? So I'm really hoping we can get there by the end of the year. That would be amazing. So hopefully that will happen. Right, on with the video. So I've bookmarked a couple of things here, which I think were pretty interesting. The Square Enix stock price is falling a lot after its Q1 earnings results that analysts said disappointing. The analyst said Final Fantasy XVI sales fell short of expectations, and concerns ahead is Final Fantasy franchise's profitability is weakening. Now there's a couple of reasons for this. Now obviously we know Final Fantasy has historically really been a PlayStation franchise. It was originally on the Nintendo Entertainment System, but eventually due to the cart size and the problems they were having with that, they refused to move away from the cart, so they moved to Sony during Final Fantasy VII era, and they've kind of stayed there. So 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I mean, 11 is my favorite. I love 11. No one diss 11. Final Fantasy 11 to me is still the goated MMO of all time. That's just my opinion, and you're not going to change it. But going back, you had 12, and then I think 13 was the first one that was actually on the Xbox platform. And then you had 14, which was on the PlayStation, and then you went back to 15 on the Xbox, and now you got 16 on PlayStation. But stuff like Final Fantasy VII Remake is on one platform, and they did sell well, but they kind of hampered their potential sales by restricting it to one platform. And especially with the PS5 and the Series X, which were kind of gated anyway, with the scalpers consuming like a lot of those consoles. I mean, I don't believe for a split second that those 40 million units sold, all 40 million of them are in a home with an active subscription playing the game. That's just playing any game. That's just not the case. The scalpers, I mean, we see reports even today where they've got thousands in warehouses they can't shift because the consoles are now readily available. But even then, that's, irrelevant to a certain degree. Even if we assume that all 14 million are actually in people's homes, 3 million for an exclusive? I mean, that's pretty disappointing as far as, Square Enix are concerned. If we go up here, according to analysts who attended Square Enix's earnings call, President Kiryu said Final Fantasy XVI sales didn't meet the high end of the company's expectations. So it met the low end, but not the high end. And PlayStation 5's installment base was the limiting factor, as it would. And the reality is, if you restrict it to one platform, your sales will be restricted. If you don't release it day and day, at least on PC, if you're not going to put it on a rival console like the Xbox, but you at least put it on the PC at the same time, your sales are going to benefit from this. But if you decide to restrict it to one platform and one platform only, and then you decide 2 years down the line or whatever it is to release the game on PC, well, the reality is it's not going to sell as well. The game will have been spoilt for many people that would have wanted to play it. A lot of them would have watched Let's Plays just to see what the story. And that's it. They're not interested in that game. So then we have this article over here by Push. And, this is a PlayStation branded website. Square Enix bafflingly backtracks on Final Fantasy XVI sales, blames slow PS5 adoption. Is there a more baffling big publisher than Square Enix? Just last month, the Japanese company issued a statement saying that it considered sales of Final Fantasy XVI extremely strong, despite the fact that it said the pre-orders were disappointingly low, worrying. After the PS5 exclusive had surpassed 3 million copies in under a week following its launch. Now, what this article doesn't tell you is that after the first week, sales went down by over 80%. The sales of like those that were interested in the game, they sold 3 million units in the first week. And then after that, it plummeted, and that was the end of it. Almost no one was buying it, or no one was interested. This could be due to because of it being exclusively on the PS5, or the fact that they course changed the way the game is, turned it into what I believe is an offline version of Final Fantasy XIV, and tried to deliver a story in that manner. But either way, the sales dropped hard, and they never picked up, and they continue to drop week on week. Now, however, new Square Enix boss Takashi Kiryu, who has taken over a new management, is saying that the action RPG didn't meet the publisher's high-end expectations. Don't forget, these games cost a lot of money. 3 million units may not have even covered their development cost. I'm hoping it did, because it is a good game, and I still recommend anyone that hasn't played it to go play it. The backtrack comes courtesy of the company's latest earnings report, as covered by Bloomberg. It was apparently a rough one, with Square Enix pointing out a 79% drop in profit. The part that bound to raise eyebrows, though, Kiryu highlighted the PS5's slow adoption as a cause of Final Fantasy XVI struggles. This is despite Sony's current-gen console recently breaking records left and right. Now, of course, as we know from the Activision and Blizzard case, right, that Sony, because of its console power, because of its market share power, sheer ability, it was even able to bully, maybe bully is a bit of a strong word, but negotiate, way better favorable deals than Xbox could, because of its market share. Where you have that 70-30 split, they were getting a much bigger share per game sold. And maybe this is the case here. In this case, if not enough people are buying it, that market share where they're actually making more as a percentage from the sale isn't working out for Square Enix. This is all hypothetical because I don't really know the actual reasons for this happening, but these are things that could have actually happened. Again, like I said, these are all speculation. But 40 million units, the amount of hype Final Fantasy XVI got from the player base, this also proves one thing. Twitter is such a small minority place where people think that just because they're over the moon about something coming out, or they're airing their opinion because they think it matters, it really doesn't. You're such a small percentage of the gaming population, you really don't matter. And that is honestly the truth. Of course, this wouldn't be the first time Square Enix has expressed disappointment in its product's performance. The publisher has a long history of stating that its sales expectations have been met, although, as mentioned, it had previously looked like Final Fantasy XVI would avoid such criticism, given the company's comparatively glowing communication back in July. Well, the original communication from them was that they were very disappointed with the amount of people that have picked up pre-orders for Final Fantasy XVI. Then when the sales came in, the first week was astonishing. You get 3 million sales in 1 week, but for the second week, for it to drop down by 80, maybe even more of a percentage in sales, that's a lot. That's a big drop. And in my opinion, I think that's where the cookie crumbles, right? If this was available on PC and Xbox Series consoles day one with PlayStation, that 3 million would probably have been 5 million, 6 million, 7 million. I mean, I genuinely don't know how many more units it would have sold. But I expect it to have sold at least between PC and Xbox, at least 3 million between them. At least. So we're looking 6 million in the first week. And even if it dropped by 80% at that point on all platforms, you're still getting that 20% from not just one platform, but from 3 platforms. So you're gaining another 40%. Do you see where I'm going with this? So I think when it comes to Square Enix, they kind of really need to change the way they do things. And I think the whole way that they're going about now, the strategy change that they're looking at, the relationship they're trying to build with Microsoft, is a clear indication that strategies are looking to change. Octopath Traveler is available on Xbox, but it's not available on PS5 or 4, and it should be. Octopath Traveler 2 is on PlayStation, but not on Xbox. I think it might have just come to Xbox recently, but I think it might be a PlayStation 2. You can see how fragmented this is. It doesn't make any sense. They kind of need to, I mean, when it comes to Square Enix, like I said, their games are beloved. A lot of people like them, whether it's Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, Nier Automata. Lots of good games here. And now they're talking and saying that, you know, they're going to pull back on risque games like AA games or single A games and only focus on AAA titles to try and push forward. They're going to stop supporting games that are not AAA. And this is really sad to see. But this is what happens if you put your eggs into one basket. If you try to gamble everything in one thing, eventually it's going to crumble if it doesn't meet expectations. And now, as gamers, for the decisions that they made yesteryear to basically support one platform and one platform only, well, now gamers are going to suffer because, sure, we'll still get the Final Fantasies and we'll get the Kingdom Hearts. But what about the other original IPs that Square Enix used to dabble in and kind of take risks on? It looks like those are a thing of the past in their new strategy. But hey, let's look at the positive. If they are looking to make future games cross-platform, day one, Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, PC, well, Switch where it can actually work, that's good for gamers. And hopefully, when sales are up and money is coming in, they will reconsider their strategy and look at taking those risks again on some of the more niche games, because those niche games are actually pretty damn cool. And it's a shame that they're going down this route. And all because the expectations of Final Fantasy 16 just were not met on a single platform. But in the end, for all the hype, for all the chatter, for all the banter, for all the console warring that the PlayStation fans did for Final Fantasy 16, I don't care no matter how you want to sugarcoat it. Considering how you are parading it left, right, and center. 3 million units, or whatever it sold, maybe it hasn't hit 4 million yet. So 3 million units for a 40 million user base. And I know not everyone's interested in Final Fantasy, but 3 million in a 40 million user base is not enough to claim exclusivity. And that's just my opinion. If you want to hold on to that exclusivity, you need to be putting out numbers like God of War when it hits 10 million. That's a good exclusive. That's what's selling consoles. That's doing the rounds. But 3 million? Sorry, Chief. That ain't it. Well, that's all I got for you. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Remain legend.